and that it's working. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk for probably about 5 or 10 minutes about the kinds of things we're trying. I'm not going to talk too much about the project itself. There's going to be a session on that at the Hui, and you'll be able to find out a whole lot about that then. But I'm just going to talk about what we're trying to do with it and how it could be good for the networks as a whole. And then, obviously these sessions are really around, what are some of the big things we can work collectively on over the coming year to be able to progress and to move forward. And I guess that we have quite a strong process already for supporting, and through Zero Waste Network, we've built Localized, which is a mechanism for helping community recycle centres and zero waste hubs get up and going. But environment hubs have been working a lot collectively under their contract with Ministry for the Environment through the Community Environment Fund the last few years, but really need to look for some bigger doorways about how we can tap into behaviour change money. So one thing that people said to us when we did the original discussions was that they really wanted to be connected and have ways of networking and getting to spend time with other people working on the same stuff. So the behaviour change people are going, we really want to have regular ways of connecting up and being, part of conversations about the work we're doing, what we're up to, the problems we're having. And so we see this project as a way of enabling that. Another thing people said was that they really wanted to have a kind of like a professional development, learning kind of opportunities coming through the network that we could, that they'll be able to learn and share information and ideas and stuff like that with one another. So that's something else that we would really like to be able to develop through this work. We've done some work with an organisation called Pocket Knife to build what we're calling an impact framework. So a lot of organisations like ours are really keen to be able to prove the impact of what we're doing, but we're not always able to find straightforward and simple or clear ways of doing that. And so we've been working with them to come up with what they're calling a monitoring, evaluation and learning process. And we're hoping that through this project, we can come up with a really useful model to share with others that will be able to be dropped down to organisations or applied to programs or to, use them people's organisations, and to be able to build the relationships with Pocket Knife. That would mean that people can easily and cheaply create a theory of change and a model for their impact measurement and the way that they're going to evaluate and monitor and learn from what they're doing. And then the fourth thing that we really wanted to think through is, like, we all know that giving people information doesn't really help them to shift where they're at. If we think about how we're going to work with our communities to be able to move them along in the zero waste journey, or to support them in their zero waste journey, or whatever journeys you guys are trying to get your communities on. And we know that telling people what to do, having a lecture or, a talk or whatever is interesting to people, but it doesn't really help them get that far with their activities. So we really wanted to build some sort of a model that's really focused on learning by doing. And a lot of us do this already, but we wanted to be able to professionalize it and really prove that that is such a valuable way of proceeding, and be able to show the value of that to government and other partners. So that sort of action-based learning, which a lot of us are, learn by doing people, and that's what attracts us about doing these practical kind of things. But a lot of the models that people are willing to pay for in behaviour change are all about either dropping down messages from on high, giving people information, or telling them what to do, and then hoping that somehow that will translate into action in their daily life, which we know usually it doesn't. So just that's kind of a bit of random background, I suppose, on what we're up to and why we're doing it. We have a session at the Hui to talk a bit more in more detail about the program and that we're starting to develop. The first year will just be getting it up, and then after that we'll be really looking to bring more organisations on board to get involved in the delivery side. So that's kind of 12 months away yet, but yeah, really happy just to, obviously this is a conversation about how we can work more collaboratively in behaviour change work and what people are looking for, what they think is valuable. So yeah, happy to open up the floor for questions and conversation.
Kia ora, Sue. Thank you. There's a big question there from Gareth, but
Yeah.
I'll let Gareth ask because he probably put it in a sentence.
Okay.
And then I've got one for you as well. So Gareth, I'll pass the floor on to you, mate.
Yeah. Yeah, all good. I was trying to, I probably rewrote that a few times. Just basically, my sense is that behavior change is one of those really hard concepts for people in government agencies to get their head around.
Yeah.
And yeah, alongside a bunch of other impacts that we all value, but they don't for various reasons. I'm just wondering what's been the nature of any of the conversations you've had recently with government agencies. Let's sort of just park the election for a second. Around, are you getting much traction in terms of them putting the behaviour change elements into tenders or into sort of project design?
Well, I guess the way we're approaching it is trying to get them to put out contracts and tenders for behaviour change itself, to see it as valuable in its own right, and to be not looking at spending money on big comms contracts for people to do advertising or whatever type contracts, and about waste minimization or energy or any of the environmental stuff that the environmental hubs are working on, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, all that kind of stuff. We have some hope because in the recent waste strategy that came out this year, they've split out behaviour change as a separate line item. So they've said information provision is totally different to behaviour change. There's sort of been a recognition that they're two different things. So you go, well, that's one baby step in the right direction. We know that the waste levy fund is increasing over the next, it's increasing next year will be up to about 300 million a year, which means that both councils and the contestable fund will have a bit more money in it to be able to spend on behaviour change work. Whether that happens or not depends a lot on how good a cases we can make to the government about what really does make a difference. And so we've been trying to front foot some of the work that we've been doing is trying to front foot that to be able to come up with really good story about how valuable is behaviour change and what sort of results are we seeing. And the thing that it's given us a chance to really look at a lot of the research and a lot of the work that's been done around the world on what effect are behaviour change programs having, what sort of behaviour change programs are effective, what sort of results are we seeing, and then dropping back towards what sort of things can you do in your community that might enable you to do something useful. The Ministry for the Environment is doing quite a lot of survey work, which is, you would have seen, most people would have seen the Kantar surveys that come out each year, which are, kind of tracking sustainable behaviours in New Zealanders, how are people thinking and what are people doing that gives them a feeling that they are becoming more sustainable, living more sustainable lifestyles. And MFE is trying to establish some survey practices that they think they'll be able to show change over time. So the ministry has a behaviour change unit, and that unit is really trying to prove the effectiveness of behaviour change. So there is a really strong interest. Whether that will survive across the new changes, we really don't know. But anything we learn is going to be useful to us anyway, and approaching other partners and working with other partners. And I think having that's one of the reasons why I guess traditionally evaluation has been at the end. You get to the end of your project and then you say whether it worked or not, or did it have an effect. But what we're really trying to shift towards is much more that dynamic thing that we all do every day in our work, where we're looking at, what did we notice yesterday? What are we going to do tomorrow? Oh, how did that work? How didn't it work? Oh, so-and-so said this, that much more kind of keeping an eye on things, evaluating as we go, and then implementing what we're learning. So although government traditionally hasn't been very, focused on, they've been much more focused on giving people messages, telling doing advertising campaigns and stuff like that. I think there is a real shift into what they're calling behavioral interventions, and that is a little bit of a lag thing that's come over from the UK and Europe. They were doing that 10 years ago, and so now, of course, we're starting to be interested in it now. It's not necessarily the be all and end all in terms of being able to do effective behavior change, but it is a really useful way of starting that conversation around what is behavior change, how useful is it, and what's going to happen. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, in our sector, there's did a campaign called Gen Less, which people may have seen, and that was the broad but extremely shallow approach. And our feedback to them was almost useless from an energy hardship point of view, because the people that you need to touch are not interacting with that approach. So you need a sort of, instead of the broad shallow, you need the deep. And really target how you're gonna dive deep. And there's a lot of work going on, hard to reach customers. They don't trust government, and they don't trust the big retailers. And so how do you reach them? And you reach them through organisations like ours who have got that trust.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things we fought quite hard for was to be bottom up. There's a lot of pressure on us to kind of go with the traditional story of, top down, just broadcasting through social media or something like that. And we had to hold the line quite hard around just that we are bottom up people. We want to engage in real ways with people on the ground, and that's where our value lies, and that's where we believe real change happens. So I totally agree with you, Gareth, that sort of that broadcast strategy, it does reach some people, but whether it results in any real change is actually the jury's out on that. Yeah, that's right. And so I think that deep investment, and what we know is when you invest in programs where people feel more connected and they're engaged and they're involved in things, that's you start to get some real change, and people start to feel empowered, and they that they do lots of other stuff, not just the topic that you're talking about to them or with them. There's a lot of other benefits that flow from that.
Thanks. So I've got a question here from Liana, just around thinking about the topics that we've covered so far this week, and it is around that collaboration and I guess what is the crossover between, I guess, this behaviour change or engagement approach and the topics like the energy conversation, CRS, as well as how we engage with Parliament.
I think there's the crossover that I see. I tend to go, a little bit global. So if I'm just everyone glazes over, just wave your hands at me and I'll stop. But the crossover that I see is that we're doing things every day on the ground, which would be very useful for policymakers to know, and would help them to guide their thinking and their policy development and their effectiveness in making sensible decisions about how they're going to deploy resources, and whether those resources actually drop to the local level. At the moment, when we are talking to government, there's a lot of confusion about what community is and what community-led is, and whether community is a thing or, isn't it a thing? And I feel as though the more concrete projects that we can do like this, where we have a very specific sort of story to tell. So whether it's this food waste project, or whether it's container return scheme and the story of how that comes to life at grassroots and how that helps government to deliver its goals, the more concrete those, same with energy, but Gareth would be able to speak to that more clearly than I can. Or actually like the energy, the insulation work and stuff like that, you can see that every single government minister that you hear speaking, they always pull that one out of their back pocket. That's the classic card they pull out. Oh yeah, well, we're all helping these people to do home insulation. And what we wanted them to do is, like, we want them to have 10 cards they can pull out of their back pocket, that it's not just all on this one thing. They're going, oh yeah, well, there's this jobs for nature thing, or there's this, that we want them to be able to go, community is a actor, community is a player, local scale action is effective and powerful, but we need to have real stories to tell them, because if you talk to them in theory, they're like, yeah, but that's all's good, but I really want to know how would it work. And so we have to use these opportunities that we have to bring real benefits and actual cash into our organisations, but we want to be able to translate that back into something we're saying to the ministers and the people in government or the councils about how effective our action is. So it's a bit of a mobilist loop. You kind of have to do the thing, you come up with this really good kind of story to tell, you go and tell it to everyone to prove that you're doing the thing, and then you go back around again. So, and hopefully we're all benefiting in the process. So that's how I think about it, but other
Can
people
I
have
just
different ideas.
agree with all of that, sir, and I'll just bring out what Maureen's been putting in the chat. I agree with that completely. Yeah, the having the warmer Kiwi homes in your back pocket piece happened because in 2012, Motu and Philippa Howden Chapman from Otago Uni did an evaluation of the program, and it came out at roughly for every dollar the government put in, they saved $5.
Yeah,
and it was such a easy, simple thing for a minister to understand that had robust research in behind it. They did another evaluation last year, and it came out roughly the same number. So that's locked and loaded. Having that research, having those internationally known researchers backing up what you've done, and understanding the behaviour change elements of that. You can put the insulation in, but you still got to turn your heater on. All that sort of stuff. Was absolutely critical for that. That program's been off and on in government for 18 years. I mean, how many different governments has that survived? And it's done that through that research that was in there. So I think that can't be underestimated, the value of having some really good, robust evidence and science for the policy people to hang on to as well. Really important.
Very cool. I think hopefully that also answered some of Maureen's questions around the importance of having that robust evidence in this sort of situation, which kind of leads to the question I was thinking of, and that's around when I think about the example we've just gone through with the food waste reduction program. One of the things that scares me is often the terms of evaluation or what is success is often can be determined by those who hold the cash. And it always concerns me that you're almost set up to fail in some ways. But how have you found that experience? And are you feeling kind of confident that we're moving into when we talk about evaluation, it is genuine conversations about what is success and how we might measure it that really brings out the best in the process, but the community aspects you're looking for?
Well, I guess the interesting thing for me is that there's still a real disjoint between the climate, the emissions reductions impacts of, food waste prevention and the story that's being told and the evaluation side. There's, for us, a lot of things are often connected. We know that if we produce and ship and process and take to the supermarket a whole lot of food, and then it goes to someone's fridge and doesn't get eaten, that a massive amount of emissions consequences upstream have been wasted. And that story hasn't really come into the evaluation side so far. The ministry are not really connected to that in a real sense. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and one of the things that we're trying to do is to use the base that we have to be able to push the boundaries around how they do think about what's important to include, what's not important to include, what actually is a real change, what's just make work. And a lot of our kind of measures that we have now are, they're kind of lead indicators in the sense that it's counting activities. We did these things, but it doesn't really speak to what came out of that in the long term. And generally it's, it might be 5 years or 10 years before you really see momentum starting to build from activity. And I think that that's something that we really want to focus on, is how do you show that longer term change as well. But yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, other people might have something to say about that.
Just while people are thinking, there's a comment from Helen. Thank you, Helen. It's around just, confirming supporting the whole notion that evaluation is so important to, I guess, to those who fund us, leaders and accountability part there as well. And I guess for us as I guess representatives of the communities that we serve, that it's also around making sure that there's a transparent and fair process and understanding what success looks like. Otherwise, you can have things like cost benefit analysis based on a financial framework, which is always going to say you guys cost more, but we love what you do. If you can do it cheaper, then we'll take it. It also reminds me of, I guess, I'm looking at it from, I guess, the role Pata Kore has probably played in being able to guide some of the, giving that more holistic look at evaluation. And I guess the roles that they've played in the past, and how have you found that in terms of, I guess, the beginning of this particular project, Sue?
Yeah, I guess I have two thoughts. I have two thoughts about that. I just started thinking about something that while you're talking about fast failure, like one of the things we've worked really hard in this project is to go in with not a finished concept. There's a lot of pressure to have a final idea and to do the thing. And we were going, well, we can't really do that because we really need to learn as we go. We want to start, we want to test things out, we want to try them, we want to see if they work, and then we want to build on them. And so we've been trying to build that sort of idea of innovation into contracting with government or doing work with government. It's not going with a project, doing the project and finishing the project and that's it. It's actually designing as we go and working with the people that are involved to be able to get those feedback loops happening. And then working with Pata Kore has been very good because they're pushing the boundaries in a lot of different ways as well. So there's a lot of new understanding coming from government about how people work together and what relationships look like. And I think one of our big surprises has been, to us, relationship is very important. And we just, I think the ministry is just learning a lot about relationship. That's a new thing for them. Their strategic partnerships unit, they're trying to understand how to have better relationships and to work in partnership to progress things. But that's, it's early days with all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a point there from Liana, and I think what we're looking at is taking the whole example or framework methodology approach to behaviour change as part of whatever it is that we decide to look at, whether it's CRS or some of the energy work. There is the behaviour change element of it, and what are the sort of the shared is there a framework that sort of sits comfortably with us that seems to either work well, or we're looking to build so that we can get more traction in some of our mahi. Gareth?
I was just going to say the other bit of work that's happening in Wellington, and yes, wait and see whether it's still relevant, but the equitable transition strategy is being written right now. And when that first started, it was only about emission reduction, which I'm sure to most of us sounds bonkers because you don't split emission reduction and adaptation in the real world. One project covers both. So government finally realised that middle of this year, and a couple of the ministers, Carmel Cipollone was one of them, asked MB to rewrite the strategy with adaptation in it as well, which threw them for a complete loop and kind of freaked them out a little bit. And I may not have helped us out a little bit, I don't know, but I said pretty much exactly what Sue is mentioned around failing fast. We are clearly, and anyone who says that we're not going to fail as we do this transition, at worst lying. At worst, they might be unethical as well. We are clearly going to fail in elements of what we're trying to do from a societal point of view. That freaks out policy people in Wellington, that idea. They just really can't handle that. That's very stressful for them. So that idea of having partners outside government who can wear that failure, but still provide a successful outcome for policy people, I think is hugely valuable. I don't think any of us have massive egos, so it's okay for us to admit that we fail in something, but we're making good traction in the long game. I think that angle around behaviour change, with behaviour change sort of core element to that transition, supporting people to get through the next 30, 40 years. I think it's got huge value. It's just about how do we communicate that to government and to philanthropy and councils and others who are looking to support us.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gareth. And I see Leanna's got a very sensible question about what are you saying we should do, Sue? And I think that it ties into what you're saying, Gareth, which is, I guess the idea that I'm putting forward is that we have the opportunity with this project to use it as a vehicle to say, we're learning lots of interesting things as we're going along about these topics, like, how can we use this as a platform for networking and connecting? How can we use it as a platform for professional development and learning? How can we use it as a framework for monitoring, evaluating, and learning, which is really a way of talking about how do you innovate safely? And then, how do we, how do we build a good model for learning by doing? And what might that look like? And I think it would be really interesting to see whether people are interested in and being part of those, if we it would be a thing which is a layer on top of the project. So the project's going to run along, lots of things are going to happen, lots of different members will be involved over the 3 years, but these opportunities to learn more together are maybe what I'm trying to signal that would be good to invest time as 3 networks into. Does that make
Cool.
any sense?
Thanks, Sue. Leon's raised a good point around, I guess, there's this whole term about behaviour change and, what is the language that we should be using around this. And, some government departments run away from it, some embrace it. But are there other terms that we could use instead?
I'll say a thought about it, and then maybe other people could throw theirs in. I guess that one thing we've struggled with over the 20 years that I've been involved in this is like the difference between what's information, giving people information, or doing an ad, and what's actually an investment in changing behaviour, which is a generational kind of activity, or a year long or a 5-year long process. And so I think behaviour change is a useful language in that it is finally embedded in the waste strategy, and that there is some traction with government. So there is actually a little bit of, something to hang it on in there. I'd be a bit reluctant to abandon it just when we've managed to get it to be a thing. But, totally take the point that it's, it's already got its own labels and people already use it in certain ways. But yeah, interested to hear what others think.
You just want to say also feel free to jump in if it's easier to verbalise your question as well. Sorry, Gareth, were you going to?
It's just, I agree. It's a bit like, for me, resilience. Like I still like the word, but it's starting to feel a little bit like sustainability. Like it's getting overused, and it's getting used by people who don't understand it. What it actually is, and we're going to redefine that for sure over the next 10, 15 years, as climate change continues to whack us on the head, and we're trying to work out what that actually is. But I can just see a bunch of cynical contract tenders going, this is going to add resilience, and they're not going to know what that actually means when they're saying it. So I get it in terms of, words are important, but each one's got its own prejudices, I guess. And some people like the word community. Sue mentioned that before. There's a bunch of people in Wellington who have no idea what that means as an organising force. And so it kind of falls on deaf ears. So you have to sort of talk about local economic development all of a sudden, which is, might be 30 or 40% of the reason we're doing it, but that's the only bit that they resonate with. So I think it might be a little bit horses for courses. We just need to know our targets really well, and use the words that they're going to bounce with.
It's good. There's some really good comments in the chat. So which is really cool. It talks about paradigm shifts, but also around the context around these are tools, one of the many that we'll have in our kite to be able to achieve an outcome, which is really, really neat. I'm learning a new skill of trying to read fast and talk like I know what I'm talking about at the same time. So just having a look at this. That's cool.
Hey, can I say something?
Yes, please. Oh,
Kia ora,
Sarah.
kia ora. I'm here with Zero Waste Network, but I have spent a long time working at Extreme Zero Waste in behaviour change and comms, and teaching a lot of sewing before the plastic bag ban. And I was listening in around, especially also yesterday with like changing policy, and that on the ground teaching people and having that learning by doing experience, teaching people to make their own reusable bags, and then suddenly there was a ban and I didn't need to do that anymore. Or specifically, I went to the Greyland market and I didn't need to do it anyway because they all had their reusables. But it's when we talk about behavior change, and like I get it, it's a useful word and it's in policy and things. On the ground, I've always felt kind of uncomfortable with that being like my email sign off, or like, because it kind of feel like I'm telling people what they ought to do or how they ought to live. And so I'm trying to focus on inviting people into the party of this other life, like an invitation, as opposed to like you don't have a behavior change workshop because people don't necessarily want to go along to be told what to do. So grassroots level, the language used is often different, and then in reporting it's measuring that behavior change. But it is really interesting in the different spaces that we use it. But I just thought I'd share that little perspective from there, which I'm sure many in this group are also aware of as well.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Sarah. Like what you might say in your reporting to government is totally different to what you say in your outreach to your community. So I think that that behavior change word is good for us when we're going, this is kind of the general thing we're trying to do, and then that kind of conversation with government and maybe thinking about, have we achieved the impact? But yeah, when you're talking, you turn around and talk to your community about things, it's totally different words you would use. Yeah. And even your description of yourself, totally agree. It's not the framing that you would use in that conversation. Yeah.
One of the themes that seems to be coming through in the chat is around it's around where the skills sort of lie across our networks, and where we can start to tap into some of those skills. And I think part of the strengthening Hui's kaupapa is around realizing what that looks like for us. Some of us have great experience in the concept of behavior change. Some have a really crazy cool way of doing it. It's not called behavior change, and some are really good in the area of lobbying. And so I think the opportunity for us over the few days that we'll be together is to really explore that. And I think the pre-Hui sessions have been really good at getting us thinking about what they could look like. So I do totally talk with the whole concept of, how do we tap into different expertise and skills. And one of the things we talked about this morning was, for a very long time, our people who are running our organizations end up being the people that have to learn how to be specialists in different things and do everything. It's very nice, 2023, we can actually pay for some expertise for once. So that whole access to it is important in that shared learning. So that's certainly one of the key strengths or potential superpowers that we have as free networks. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, so I see Maury had a thought about, where does the expertise come in? And, if you're a small organization, it can be hard work trying to build any kind of like measurement framework or anything like that. And so I guess what we're suggesting is that we we have to build one through this project, and so we've chosen a way of doing that, and we're going to test it out and see how it works. And we've chosen to work with some people that we think are very values aligned. They're working in the same way that we are, and they applying the same kind of way. They're trying to get to the same place that we are. So what we would hope to be able to do is to just refine that model and turn it into I don't want to say a product, but something which is a simple and easy process for everyone to use, to come up with a template that we can use to go through that, so that it costs a lot the first time you do something, the 10th time you do it, it's a lot cheaper, and the 50th time you do it, it's easy and simple and straightforward, and you've got people who are experts because there's already people who have done at least 50 of them in your gang. And so I guess that's the story of kind of standardizing and kind of adopting a model that works and coming up with a process that works really well. So I guess that's what I'm suggesting, that we use this opportunity to test out a way of doing it and to try to refine it and simplify it and make it workable and functional for us, so that a small organization can use it and be able to feel like they can be successful with it. And also one of the budget lines in this project is to have some in-house expertise in this area. And what we're hoping is that then that person, we might be able to share someone across 3 different organizations who can do impact work, and then be able to have that resource to draw on by the members. So not going to happen overnight, but it will happen. Yeah.
For those who remember the Pantene ad of the
Yeah.
80s.
The old people in the group, yeah.
No, thank you. And talking about old Pythagoras, thank you for that, Maury. Reminds me of my bad maths lessons in college. Just keeping an eye on time for us. What's been really neat also is to see the amount of wealth of knowledge that people are putting in, links to documents that might be helpful and useful as well. So coming together and having those kōrero over the hui is going to be fantastic for us to do. And I think one of the things that Sue was talking about was really around that the food waste project itself is really a vehicle to test out to be able to do the things that we want to do that can help us go forward to building some internal capability in areas that we haven't had in the past, or that we either too small or can't afford to bring in. I think that's part of our own sustainability and hopefully our thriving strategy for our network. So I think that's an exciting part, and I'm looking forward to sharing more about the food waste reduction project itself when we get to the hui, because there's evidence, I guess, of how we're testing some of the things that we've been talking about today. Gareth, I've seen you unmasked.
Yeah, man, you're onto it. All I have to do is unmute. I'm going to talk. That's great. Look, I just wanted to raise the point rather than talk about it from any area of expertise, that clearly this is one of the areas that we need to work really closely with organisations like Parakore in terms of how Māori and other organisations and like Pacifica and what have you, how they interact with us on this, because we won't all have the answers, even in the communities that we know and love. There's going to be elements of those communities that won't respond to Pākehā centric approach. So I guess it's just acknowledging that there's probably a bit of a sea change in how that's done as well with this new government. I'm not sure we'll all be comfortable with that, but we're probably just going to have to live with it and do our best, and probably be even better allies than we are right now with those sorts of organisations.
Thanks, Gareth. Talking about sharing skills, I have a question before we wrap up and before I give, I guess, Sue the last chance. Does anybody know how to save chat on Zoom?
Yes.
Oh, good. Who's that? Tess.
It's Tess here.
Oh, thank you, Tess.
And I will just move you over so I can see the screen properly. So see on your chat, you've probably got a bunch of little icons at the very bottom of the chat. There's a wee
Yes.
text one, etc., and then 3 dots.
Yes.
If you press the 3 dots, it should say save chat,
Oh, wow.
and then you should be able to tell it where you want to save it to as well.
Fantastic. Amazing. Oh, you'll have to get you to do some training for some of us who are
I'm
scared
glad
of
I
this
could
stuff.
contribute something to my first meeting.
Thank you so much, Tess. Look forward
No
to meeting you
worries.
properly.
Yeah, you too.
Okay. All right. Sue, any final words before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is I'm not, I guess to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we use the food waste project as the only example, but it just creates an opportunity for us to have these platforms to talk together about the various programs that we're working on and to share our ideas and our knowledge about how things are going. So yeah, the concept is that, you know, we create these opportunities to come together and work on these different things. So yeah, that's really it. And really appreciate everyone, you know, taking their lunch hour out to be here, and look forward to meeting the people who are attached to some of these names next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Sue. Thanks to everyone for coming out. We've got our session tomorrow, our last one. You're gonna miss these next week. So yeah, so tomorrow we're going to be talking about a regional project that might be an example of where some of our members are already doing things together, and sharing some of that and what sort of learnings we've had and all opportunities that come out of that. So before I finish, I'll close us off with our karakia. But also, yeah, just wish you well for the rest of the week. And for those who will see tomorrow, we'll see you tomorrow. But our karakia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, me te wairua i te ara tangata, koia rā e rongo, whakairi ake ki runga, tūturu whakamaua kia tina, tina, hauie, huie, tai ki
Tai
e.
kia.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Kia ora.
Vano. Have a great day.
Could you see how to do the saving say?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you
Oh,
to
cool.
the people that were helping.
Yeah, that was good, because I couldn't do it, but it's probably because I'm not the host. Yeah, sweet.
Right.
So
Great.
Yeah,
you're
thanks,
on.
Liana, for the
That's okay. It's just got such good links in it that and I
Yeah.
know you have to sometimes manually do it. Great work, folks. You pulled it together really well.
Ooh,
Oh, a
good
bit of a
questions.
last minute kind of like thing, but yeah, hopefully you got enough sensible statements out of us to make some kind of plan.
No, I did, and that's why
Great.
I sometimes just go in and be the dummy in the chat, just to
Yes.
it, because then it's really good. It became very clear. So good on you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because it was a bit of a funny session. Say and I weren't quite sure what the plan was or how it was all meant to work. And when we talked to Jo, she was just like, no memory of
Yeah.
being asked to do this. So we were just like, okay, sweet. Well,
That's particularly why you did such a good job. And
yeah,
this
we'll
is
do
it.
something. Yeah.
Someone's got to make a proposal somewhere, otherwise
Yeah.
we'll all be staring, looking at each other at the hui. So this is
Yeah.
good. It's not just that you don't have to be right; you just have to have an
Yeah.
opinion,
Just have
and
to
then
have it. Yeah.
we'll see what happens when we socialize it a bit more, in the following weeks. But no, you did a great job. Okay.
Oh, sweet.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Thank
Great.
you.
Glad it made some sense. Cool.
Oh,
Awesome.
thank you both. I'll find where we've saved these. It's gone to the folder in the computer, and I'll pull it out.
Thank you.
Yay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bye.
We'll see you in
Bye.
a week or two, Liana.
Yeah.
Okay, ka kite.
Cool. You're good?
Good. Thank you.
Okay. All
Thanks,
right.
Sue.
No worries. Bit of a scramble, but at least it made some sort of sense. So
Yeah,
we'll
we're
go and
good.
get some coffee. See ya.
Will do. Bye for now.